So, today we're diving into something that could totally change how you think about your health. It comes from Dr. Peter Attia, and the core idea is pretty revolutionary. What if, instead of waiting around for diseases to pop up, we started actively preventing them? What if we could engineer a life that's not just longer, but way, way better? This quote actually comes from a recurring dream Attia had back when he was a cancer surgeon. He would dream he was on a street, just desperately trying to catch all these eggs falling from a skyscraper. And yeah, he got really good at catching them, but he could never stop them from falling in the first place. For him, that was the perfect metaphor for modern medicine. We do these absolutely heroic things to save people at the very last minute, but we do almost nothing to stop the crisis from ever happening. Okay, so here's our game plan for this explainer. First, we're going to talk about modern medicine's biggest blind spot. Then we'll meet the so-called four horsemen. These are the diseases we really need to outsmart. After that, we'll talk about redefining the goal from just living longer to living better. And finally, we'll get into a practical toolkit you can use to start building your own longevity strategy, like today. So Attia makes this really interesting point. He says our current medical system, what he calls Medicine 2.0, is absolutely brilliant at dealing with what he calls fast death. Things like a car crash or some other major trauma. But it's completely failing us when it comes to the slow death that's caused by chronic disease. And what this chart really lays bare is this total mismatch, right? We're using the playbook for fast death, these heroic last-second interventions, to fight slow death. The problem is, by the time we actually declare an emergency for something like heart disease, the real crisis has been quietly building, completely silently, for decades. Okay, so if we're going to get ahead of this slow death problem, we've got to know our enemy. Attia identifies 4 major chronic diseases. He calls them the four horsemen that are, just by the numbers, the most likely things to end our lives. All right, here they are, the big 4. Heart disease, cancer, neurodegenerative disease like Alzheimer's, and metabolic issues like type 2 diabetes. Just think about it. Heart disease and cancer alone are responsible for nearly half of all deaths in the US. And here's the kicker. While these diseases show up when we're older, their roots often start growing way, way earlier, when we're young adults or even teenagers. And this number, 20 years, this just says it all, doesn't it? That heart attack that seems to come out of nowhere, it's not sudden at all. The disease that caused it has probably been building up inside that person's arteries for at least 2 decades. But our medical system, it really only pays attention at the very, very end of that long road. All right, this next part is a really, really critical shift in how we think about aging. It's at the absolute heart of this new strategy. The goal isn't just about adding more years to your life. The real goal is to add more life to your years. It's about shifting our whole focus from lifespan to what Attia calls healthspan. And this is the goal. This is the real prize. Your health span is that amazing part of your life where you feel good, you're physically capable, you're mentally sharp, you're emotionally well. It's the difference between just being alive and actually truly living. So take a look at this chart. It pretty much sums up the 2 paths we can take. That first bar, that's the typical path, where the last 10, maybe 15 years of life are just dragged down by sickness and decline. The second bar, though, that's the goal. That's what this new approach, Medicine 3.0, is all about. We want our health span to almost perfectly match our lifespan. The idea is to compress morbidity, basically to squeeze that period of decline into the shortest possible time, right at the very end. Okay, so that's the what and the why, but what about the how? How do we actually do this? Well, Attia lays out 5 key pillars, 5 areas we can all focus on to start building that longer, healthier life for ourselves, starting right now. First up, and Attia is just crystal clear on this, exercise. He calls it the single most powerful drug we have for longevity. And he's not kidding. Exercise has a more profound, more wide-ranging positive effect on our health span and our lifespan than literally anything else we can do. It's more effective than any pill a doctor could prescribe for preventing chronic disease, period. So how should we be thinking about exercise? Well, he's got this awesome framework called the Centenarian Decathlon. It's all about reverse engineering your fitness. You ask yourself, what do I want to be able to do physically when I'm 95 or 100? Maybe it's picking up your great-grandkids. Maybe it's carrying groceries up a few flights of stairs. Or maybe it's just being able to get up off the floor by yourself. Whatever those things are, you start training for them now. Okay, so exercise is absolutely foundational, but it doesn't work in a vacuum, right?
It's part of a whole strategy. Next up is nutrition. This means forgetting about all the diet wars and just figuring out what works for your body. Then there's sleep. This is not a luxury, people. It's a non-negotiable. It's critical for cleaning out your brain and protecting you from all four of those horsemen. The third pillar is emotional health, because chronic stress and unhappiness have a direct physical impact on our biology. And finally, exogenous molecules. This is just a fancy way of saying we should use supplements and medicines smartly and proactively based on our own data, instead of just waiting for a crisis to hit.
This quote, it apparently just stopped Peter Attia in his tracks. His therapist said it to him, and he had this huge realization that for all his focus on physical health, he was totally neglecting his emotional well-being. He shares his own really difficult journey with this to prove a point. A long life is a pretty empty prize if it's a miserable one. Emotional health isn't some soft, fuzzy concept. It's a core pillar of your health span. And look, just like you wouldn't expect to get physically strong without going to the gym, emotional health also needs tools and practice. Attia personally found a ton of value in things like dialectical behavior therapy, or DBT. It's basically a toolkit of skills that helps you manage your emotions and deal with stress. It just goes to show you can train your mind with the same intention that you train your body.
All right, let's pull all these threads together now, because this is more than just a list of things to do. It's a fundamental shift in your mindset. It's about changing your entire relationship with time, with aging, and with what you really want out of this one life.
Attia tells this incredible story about a friend of his, a survivor of that miracle on the Hudson plane crash. And his friend said that people get old when they stop talking about their dreams for the future and only talk about the past. And that's the whole point. Longevity isn't about running away from death. It's about having more time to live, more time to chase your goals, more time to have a future that you're excited about and actively building. And that really brings us to the final, most important question. This isn't about changing everything overnight. That's not how it works. The journey to a longer and, more importantly, a better health span starts with one single step. Maybe for you, that's just a 10-minute walk after dinner. Or maybe it's turning off your phone an hour before you go to bed. So, what's your first step going to be?